All right. I am not entirely sure if we're live. Yes, there we go. What's good, ladies and gentlemen? I need to apologize right from the get go to all of you. If the noise on my mic is way too much, it is a fan that's blowing incredibly hard right there in the back because my AC, I'm waiting for the maintenance guys to arrive to actually fix it. And we have a heat wave in the Western Cape at the moment, so it's kind of crazy. But if the fan is annoying you and if you can't hear or the sound is bad, just tell me and I'll turn off the fan and I'll just sit here and sweat for the next 2 hours. So please let me know. How are you guys doing? I hope you guys are well. It is, of course, Thursday, the 12th of March, just so that we know everything that you're going to hear in this podcast. It is true as of right now, what we know right now and where we stand right now. Anything that happens after this, anything that happens after, I would say, 2 o'clock today, that is news for tomorrow. So, you're not going to hear it here. Spartan, how you doing, sir? Christine, how you doing? Noose, how you doing, sir? Francois, how you doing? Peter, how you doing? I hope you guys are super well. Please, like I said, let me know if the noise in the mic is too much, and I will turn off the fan, and you guys can just sit here and watch me absolutely die of heat. It is 34 degrees Celsius, and obviously I'm in the studio, so there's literally zero air moving. That's why I have the AC, but with the AC not working, it's insanity at the moment. Just very quickly, want to give a massive shout out to Graham for the donation. The donation came in just after yesterday's stream, so I didn't actually see it, and I couldn't say thank you while we were streaming. But Graham, thank you so much for that donation. And then, of course, massive shout out and thank you to Nicholas for the 35 Rand donation or super chat right here on YouTube. I truly appreciate you, sir. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so today's video or stream is going to be, we're going to go deep into geopolitical discussions as well as the future of South Africa. We're also going to be attempting to make an argument from first principles. There's a lot of noise that is happening throughout South Africa, and well, let's get right to it. Right, we're talking about this. Those of you that weren't here yesterday, very quick update or very quick reminder. Brent Bozell spoke at the Biz News conference, and whilst at the conference, Brent Bozell said that he views the singing of "Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer" as a racist song. He does not view that as protected under free speech because it is incitement to violence. And he doesn't care what the courts of South Africa says. That is his view. He further and later clarified that that was him speaking in his personal opinion or in his personal capacity, not as the ambassador of America, which is a little bit shaky because technically speaking, if you are an ambassador to a country, you are always a representative of the nation that sent you, even if you're just speaking at, a conference and you're clarifying that this is your speech. The way he phrased it made it clear that that is his view. Something that actually furthers this a little bit that you should know about, the Trade Department of the United States had his speech on their website literally after it happened. What he said, in other words, is official American policy. The American government does not agree with the South African court's finding, and now we should also be very clear here, the South African courts don't even agree, because when this case was brought to the the Constitutional Court the first time in the 90s, they actually found that it was indeed hate speech. And it wasn't until many years later, and I would argue a lot of interference in the judicial system later, that the courts found that actually, no, this is just free speech. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I'm going to show you evidence that the media and the left and the supposed freedom fighters of our country, they know that it is hate speech. They know that this song is not above board. So here is Ready Tabi or Talabi or Talibi, not entirely sure how you want to pronounce her last name, but Ready is, in my opinion, a voice and a sort of a microphone for the ANC. There is not a single case or a single argument that can be made in South Africa where Reddy does not take the side of the ANC. But okay, so fundamentally, Reddy is responding to ENCA and their headline. Now, they have since removed this post and updated their headline because originally ENCA reported that Brent Bozell has been demarched. This is a fancy word for saying he's been recalled or called by the host nation, South Africa in this regard, to explain himself. They call it demarche or demarche. Demarche, I think, is French, or it might be Latin, not entirely sure, but that's the official word. It just means that he needs to go and explain himself. Okay, but they said he was demarched due to his views and stance on kill the Boer, kill the farmer. Reddy takes issue with this, but listen to how Reddy describes the issues that she takes with it. What is wrong with you? Even at this grave geopolitical moment, when editorial framing on Iran, Gaza, etc. have been shown to have consequences, you continue to be complicit in drumming up empathy for wrongdoers. He was not demarched over kill the Boer comments. It was over his entire speech. The main reason was his attack on the judiciary. The I don't care about your courts. There is an editorial consequence to your framing. It sets the stage for international headlines that say U.S. ambassador demarched for denouncing kill the Boer, who sounds reasonable in that framing. Now, keep in mind, if kill the Boer, kill the farmer is indeed, as Reddy and others have consistently claimed, just a struggle song. It's just a cultural struggle song. It's history. It has no problems. It's not a call to violence upon white people. Then what's the problem if people think that that's why he was demarched? I mean, this would be like saying that the man has been demarched because he said the nursery rhyme Humpty Dumpty, and it might make him seem empathetic towards eggs. It's like, well, Humpty Dumpty is not an offensive song or an offensive nursery rhyme, and so there's no reason to frame it that way. No, but Reddy understands that the song is deeply racist, that the song is deeply problematic, and that people who hear that song throughout the Western world, because think about this, if you sang that song in any other country in the world, you would most likely face jail. Because rightfully so, ordinary, good people would listen to a song like that and say that, wait, that is insanity. You're literally telling people to go out and kill members of a specific race. How dare you? Now, that just sort of frames their entire argument. They know that song is hugely problematic. They also know exactly what the song is calling for, and this is even more evidence that what the song is calling for is what people like Reddy want, right? They want this. The freedom fighters of our country would love nothing more than for millions and millions of freedom fighters to go out and slaughter the white population. If they didn't, they could literally just stop singing the song. It would be that simple. Now, I'm not saying that Reddy is the one that wants that. I wouldn't put words in her mouth, and nor would I speak on her behalf. But people like Reddy, who seems to be always ready for a defense for the song, there's no other explanation that I can think of that makes this song okay. Thabo Mbeki, for example, yesterday sat in front of cameras, and he was asked about the song, and he said, songs and chants in African culture should not be taken up literally. The words don't literally mean anything. And my immediate response was, well, if the words of the song are completely meaningless, why sing the song in the first place? Then it should not be hard, right, to just not sing the song. If you're not actually calling for the massacre of white people, just stop. It's creating a lot of problems for us throughout the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is hearing that song and going, whoa, that's a bit much. You see a bunch of black faces in a sea of black people all chanting, kill the Boer, kill the farmer. A lot of countries might rightly surmise this is a little problematic. Why not just stop it? If the words were indeed completely meaningless and they don't actually mean what they say they mean, then you could change the words, for example. You could just say, well, we're going to supplement it with other words. Because remember, they're saying this is a struggle song about the struggles of black people. Well, then the song should really read, kill the ANC, kill the cadres, because they're the new people enhancing the struggle, right? So you would think that the song would be updated to now really speak to the current problem, since the Boer and the farmer are no longer in charge of the country. But there's something far bigger that we need to discuss here. The argument that the ANC and the freedom fighter, the Marxists in South Africa, use in order to defend the song comes from their appeal to authority. So their argument, and Reddy does this here, where Reddy makes the argument that the courts in South Africa, right, is an authoritative body. It's an independent, authoritative body. And by the way, I'm seeing all of your comments, guys. I promise we will be moving, and I will be talking to you guys in a second and hearing your thoughts on this as well. But they're an independent, authoritative body. Moreover, the idea that you would launch an attack on an independent, authoritative body is sacrosanct under constitutionalism. So if you care about the Constitution, the attack on our courts is absolutely unacceptable. So their argument goes, the song cannot be racist because our independent, authoritative judiciary found that the song is not racist. Therefore, the song is not racist. Now, how do we approach this argument? We can do a lot of opinions. We can listen to different people's interpretations of history and how people want to view history. But something that I've started doing a while ago, probably like about 6 months ago, I started doing this. Have any of you ever heard the term reasoning from first principles? Have any of you ever heard this term, reasoning from first principles? Okay, I see CR. How you doing? Nope. It's not a song, it's a war cry. True, Scatter. But okay, so if there are people who don't know what reasoning from first principles are, I'll first start and just explain that. So when you go online, when you open up any media site in the world, so CNN, BBC, News 24, Daily Maverick, what you're getting is a biased opinion piece from the writers and the editors, right? What you're reading is their opinion on the events that took place. You're not actually reading what actually took place. Everyone is biased, and everyone has their own weaknesses and blind spots, bias from a position of bias. So what reasoning from first principles is an active component of reasoning where I try to circumvent my biases. So reasoning from first principles says, I will start at the first thing that I know to be true or that can be principally backed up. To give you guys an example of how this would go with the song's debate. So we have a song. The song is called Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer. The allegation made by the Afrikaners and by the Americans about this song is that the song is deeply racist. Okay, so let's go to first principles. Let's eliminate all the noise. Remove all the opinions, all the noise. Let's go to first principles. First principle that I know is that racism is bad. How do I know racism is bad? Because racism is the practice of applying value to a people based on an immutable characteristic. In other words, something that person cannot be held liable for. That person did nothing to achieve this goal or to be this thing. And it would make perfect sense if I use something like, let's imagine I'm the dictator of South Africa, and I come out and I say, well, the most valuable people in society are people that's fast. And as a society, we should really kill everyone that isn't fast. All of you in chat would be like, wait, what? That's insane. Right? Albert Einstein wasn't particularly fast, but everyone would argue that in terms of what he has done for humanity, he is infinitely more important to humanity than Usain Bolt. Not saying Usain Bolt isn't an incredible human being, but if we're going to make a value statement, clearly fast people are not better than slow people. Because speed and the ability to run the 100-meter dash in a specific amount of time is an immutable characteristic. I could start training for the 100-meter dash tomorrow, and maybe I'll get a little bit faster than what I am now, but I'm still probably going to run it, if I even finish it, in maybe like 30 seconds, right? Maybe I could get to 30 seconds if I really trained hard. Usain Bolt can do it in under 10 seconds because, well, he's Usain Bolt. That's just how he was born. Race is the same thing. When you apply a value proposition to someone purely based on their race, it ignores all of the other factors that make humans the way that they are, right? Kicklaw, that's actually a brilliant example. You can't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. And that's the problem with racism. You're using immutable characteristics in order to apply value. So I know principally racism is wrong, right? I know that. Now we go to the next part of the song. It is a song that sings for the direct killing of a specific group. So the song applies a value of null to a specific group. From first principles, if you apply value based on the color of someone's skin, that is racist. So the song already qualifies as racist based on first principles because it is applying a value saying that Boers and farmers do not deserve to die. They are not valuable enough in order to preserve their lives. So that makes the song racist from the position of first principles. Then we go a little bit further and we say, okay, the other problem with the song, what many people are saying, is that it is incitement to violence because the song calls on people to go and kill this group called the Afrikaner and the Boer, the farmer and the Boer, of course, being a stand-in for white people in South Africa. And we say, right, if racism is wrong, it stands to reason that if you use racism to call on a group of people to go and do something to another group of people based on the color of their skin, then that is also racist and wrong and therefore is a call to violence. But now we get into another problem. If we're reasoning from first principles, we have to ask ourselves, okay, wait a second. Yes, this is a song. And yes, the song is asking for the killing of other people. So it might be a racist song. But does the song rise to the level of being excluded under free speech? That's a big question, right? Because there's plenty of songs that they could be singing that would probably still be okay. It might be very racist, but it probably won't rise to the level of being excluded from free speech. And so we ask ourselves, okay, what do we know historically about phrases and terms being repeated over and over again, and what is the impact that usually has on the people that hear it? And for this, we can go to many examples in history, but a great example of this would be back in the Roman Empire. I could go back to the Nazi Empire, and I will, but let's go back to the Roman Empire. So in the Roman Empire, if you lived in their sort of extended empire, you would have heard from literally birth almost the phrase, the peace of the gods. This was a phrase that was repeated over and over and over again for various political reasons, but one of the main political reasons was as a way for the government to not be held accountable for bad events. So the Romans believed, Rome was very open to gods, just very quickly. Rome had no problem with other gods, and the Romans would often include gods from literally all of their conquered territories. And it would not be much of an issue for them. Noose, what about De La Rey, dude? Well, Noose, De La Rey would be an example, in my opinion, of a song that might be deemed by some as racist, right? If you're a black person listening to this song, maybe you're hearing this and you're going, maybe if you're a British person, you're hearing this song and going, wow, De La Rey killed a whole lot of British people. And De La Rey was, a general in the in the Boer army. Maybe that's a little bit racist. Although I would say the song De La Rey, that would be thin. You would really be cutting the lines of what racism is very, very thin. But maybe you could make the argument that it is a little bit racist. What you can't make the argument for is that De La Rey is a call to violence, because it genuinely isn't. At no point in the song is there any call for the Afrikaner people to take up arms and go attack, right? The song is merely asking for De La Rey to return and to lead us out of the persecution that we have. That's a very different discussion from saying De La Rey come back and direct the Afrikaners to kill all the black people. If those were the words of the song, then we could probably argue and say, whoa, that's now we're rising to having a first principles discussion about the song De La Rey. But okay, so we go back and we say the Roman Empire, they have this term called the peace of the gods. Now, the Romans, as I said, are happy to include gods from literally every single empire that they conquer, and these gods just sort of form part of the gods. And according to the Romans, the gods don't really care, provided that everyone worships them, right? As long as you worship, as long as there's enough people in Rome that worship the gods are happy, and they continuously bless Rome. The gods, of course, derive a lot of their power from human prayer and human worship and sacrifices, and so it is important. What happens, however, when things start to go bad, the peace of the gods have been disturbed, because the gods are losing prayer and the gods are losing sacrifices, because more and more people are starting to worship foreign gods. The gods are angry, and now they're punishing Rome. This very specifically became a huge problem for the Christian population of Rome. You see, because unlike all of the other faithful that came from Egypt, that came from the surrounding areas, that were more than happy to accept all of the Roman gods, including their own, the Christians were very particular. They refused to worship any of the Roman gods. Even the coins that the Romans had, that had the face of Caesar, because Caesar at this point is divine, he is a god in his own right, the Christians refused to use these coins, and would oftentimes refuse to take payment in these coins, because these coins is used in worship. Right, so the Christians just refuse. And so what happens is, periodically, we see the Romans, when things start to go bad, the Romans say the peace of the gods have been disturbed, and then everyone goes and just kills a bunch of Christians, right? And the Christians go through these sort of ebbs and flows of persecution. Because they're hearing it over and over again, it's easy for the population to accept this is how it's supposed to happen. Then we can go to the Nazis. The Nazis are really the grandfathers of propaganda, because as Goebbels was able to figure out, if you repeat a lie enough times, the people just start believing it, right? The people will just accept that is the lie, and the lie is fine. So what ends up happening from a first principle perspective, if we have a song that continuously tells people to kill a certain group of people based on the color of their skin, there is a reasonable expectation that some of the people hearing the song will eventually go and do it, because they've heard it enough times that it become normalized in their own minds. The call now becomes an almost extension of logic. It's logical that we should do this. They are the problem, therefore we should do it, because that's what we've been hearing over and over and over again. So when we argue from first principles, I think we can make an incredibly strong case that the song Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer is racist, first and foremost, and is also an incitement to violence. And then I can make the argument that it doesn't matter what the courts of South Africa says, because from first principles, if I remove all opinion and feeling and thought and emotion, I just look at it from a first principle perspective, the song is dangerous. The song minimizes and compartmentalizes a certain group of society based purely on the color of their skin. Furthermore, the song repeatedly calls for the death of this group of people, and the people who hear it will eventually start to believe it. This is a bad song and should not be sung in civilized society. And very specifically, no civilized, ordinary human being would ever sing this song. So make of that and the people who sing this song whatever you will. I would argue that these people are not civilized individuals, but instead very violent racists and Marxists. But, that's that's a different discussion. Next, we can look at Reddy's. Let's do this. Next, we can look at Reddy's assertion that our courts is independent and authoritative and therefore cannot be questioned. Under no circumstances can you question the judiciary of South Africa because it is an attack on our constitution. It is an attack on our sovereignty. Independent, authoritative bodies must at all times be respected. Now, I'm going to extend this argument a little bit further. And I'm going to actually tell you, let's look at the argument of sovereignty, because this plays into the same thing. Sovereignty, the left argues, must be respected because the government in question is an authoritative organization. It received its authority because it is in charge. Now let's reason from first principles. Can you make an argument for why the Iranian regime should not be replaced, right, from first principles? Now, in order to do that, we have to go to their argument. Their argument states that the Iranian regime is a sovereign, authoritative body, and therefore America has no right to remove this regime from power. I would argue that if we go from the position of first principles, there's a problem in the logic. I see no reason why authority alone determines your right to govern. Allow me to explain. If I use their logic and I apply it consistently throughout history, I must arrive at one fundamental conclusion. Not only did Adolf Hitler have the absolute right to kill 7 million Jews, but America and the world was absolutely wrong for stopping him. Because Adolf Hitler was elected by the German people, not just once, but multiple times over. Adolf Hitler was very clear in what he wanted to do with the German country and how he wanted the Germans to be steered. And the German people were behind Adolf Hitler right up until the end. That's authority. That's sovereignty. The fact that Britain and America interfered with that, according to consistent logic by people like Reddy, means that Germany did nothing wrong. And in fact, it is America and the UK that made the mistakes here. They were the ones who invaded a country that was absolutely sovereign. It's a sovereign right. The problem with their logic, from a first principle perspective, is that suddenly no one is wrong ever. So it is perfectly reasonable and logical to say that the Iranian regime has the right to kill tens of thousands of their own citizens because they are a sovereign, authoritative body. But if we apply their logic, it is also perfectly reasonable and rational and perfectly fine for America, a sovereign nation with authority, to say no more and then attack them. So ultimately, everyone is right all the time. You see, but that's the leftists, that's their trick. Their trick is to apply rules in such a way that it allows them to nitpick. If, for example, Julius Malema is found guilty on gun charges and discharging a weapon in public, the courts are corrupt and captured, and the courts are simply against Julius Malema. However, if the courts find that the song Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer is not racist, the courts are an independent, authoritative body that must at all times be respected in a constitutional republic. Do you start to see the game? You see, by phrasing, Marxists allow themselves to operate outside the truth. They can adapt the truth and move the truth around so that they always sound as if they know what they're talking about, and they always sound sort of on the surface as if they are on the side of what is right, but that's because they've just moved the truth out of the way. If I don't need this, I can just move it a little bit here, and then look here, guys, this is actually the real thing that's actually going on here. So Reddy, from a first principles perspective, is a complete moron. And this should be remembered. But okay, enough about the first principle discussion. Let's move into what does this mean for South Africa? Where are we now, and how is South Africa operating now? Now, the demarched calls for Brent Bozell sets off alarm clocks and alarm bells all across the board. One of the key things, what was it that Brent Bozell warned about? He said, America is running out of patience. America is running out of patience. What does that look like exactly? What does it look like when America runs out of patience? Well, we have two examples, and I want to make this clear right from the start. I am not advocating for this to happen. I'm not saying that this must happen. I'm saying this could very easily happen. America reached out to Venezuela, and they started diplomatic negotiations with Venezuela to distance themselves from the Chinese and the Russians, and to instead become a neutral country that is a little bit more friendly towards America. At every single turn, the Venezuelan government under Nicolas Maduro gave America the finger. They continuously tried to use diplomatic loopholes to get the Americans to relax sanctions on them, whilst at the same time increasing the amount of drugs that flow through Venezuela into America, increasing the amount of cooperation between Russia and China and Iran. And eventually, and this is how President Trump operates, and people who have now worked with him for a while says this is how President Trump thinks. His negotiators consistently give him feedback on how the negotiations are going. When President Trump determines that the negotiations have stalled and these negotiations are now turning into a farce, he changes tactics. So President Trump isn't the kind of guy to just do a decade worth of diplomatic relationship work. If President Trump determines that he's not going to get what he wants, he changes tactics. In Venezuela, what did that look like? Well, it was an overnight operation where the military went in, special ops, and they just captured Nicolas Maduro. This was enough to send the regime of Nicolas Maduro into a frenzy, realizing that if they don't follow, Trump's recommendations, they will be next. Because the country's military, the country's security personnel was no match for what the Americans brought. Not a single American life was lost in that operation. But Nicolas Maduro was taken, and he is currently in jail awaiting sentencing or awaiting his trial. Now let's move to Iran. What does President Trump's negotiations look like in Iran? Well, after the 12-day war, where Iran's nuclear facilities are bombed to hell, President Trump immediately starts negotiations with Iran. And at least according to what we know from the official sources, the Americans are incredibly gracious towards the Iranian regime. At this point, President Trump does not want the regime to change. President Trump wants the regime to soften its position towards America. President Trump offers Khamenei and the Iranian regime free nuclear power for life, nuclear materials for life, provided that these materials are not enriched. President Trump further makes a call that zero enrichment from this moment forward will ever take place in Iran. And the reason for it is under Barack Obama that sort of tried to relax the sanctions on Iran and come to a new understanding of what, because nuclear enrichment kind of has to happen in order to build power plants, but you usually need enriched uranium up to a certain standard. And you don't need anything more than that because you're only using it as fuel to create electricity. The Iranians went way past that. President Trump saw that, right? I think it's 60% that you're allowed to enrich for commercial use. And the Iranians went way past 60%. So they were on their way to building a nuclear bomb. That's ultimately what they wanted to do. In the negotiations that President Trump had with the Iranian regime after the 12th Day War, President Trump is very clear. No more uranium enrichment. We will give you lifetime access to enriched uranium for your commercial power plants, but you will not be able to enrich it yourself. That's a non-starter, because every single time you guys start this, you want to start building atomic bombs. So we're not even going to go there. And it should also just be mentioned for anyone that might be on the side of Iran on this, Iran's constitution in its own articles has death to Israel and death to America in its constitution. So let there be no doubt as to what Iran wants to do with America and with Israel, right? It's in their own constitution that America and Israel must be destroyed. This is their goal. This has always been their goal. And the Iranian regime has been busy for 47 years taking hostages from America, killing American soldiers, bombing and threatening their own neighbors in the Middle East. Iran has had a very bad history. So President Trump has his negotiators. They're sitting down, and the negotiators give feedback to President Trump. President Trump determines that the Iranians are biding their time. Now, obviously, this comes with a lot of extra information because the game is information. And it is entirely plausible that the intelligence of America started to notice that the Iranians were ramping up their ballistic missile production. So what were the Iranians doing? They were playing for time. They were hoping that if they keep the Americans busy long enough in these negotiations, they'll be able to build up enough ballistic missiles that they could basically tell America, if you attack us, we level everything. We level everything. So don't try us. President Trump obviously recognizes that this is what the Iranians are up to, and he decides to act. And one could argue he decides to act completely overboard, but it's a good show of force. America is serious. If they want you to come to the table, you come to the table. And you come with solutions, not more problems. Now let's take South Africa as an example here. And for this, I think there's an interesting bit of things that's been happening. So if you look at the freedom fighters across the country, you will see calls for the expulsion of Brent Bozell. You will see things like this from Fikile Mbalula. President Trump in his first term as US president, he gave us a good ambassador. He even supported us during COVID-19. Whatever happened in his second term deserved to be studied in Harvard. Now, of course, the argument is actually very simple. What changed from President Trump's first term to his second term is President Trump realized that the Marxists cannot be reasoned with. The Marxists and the axis of resistance that the ANC and the Chinese and the Russians are a part of, this is not a group of people that you can reason and debate with, because they will use whatever international law loopholes exist to just further their own goals. And I'm going to take a quick detour here and talk about that for a quick second. Actually, no, we'll get back to international law because there's another point that I want to make, and there we'll discuss international law for a little bit. But you go down the list. I'm going to talk about this in a second as well. But you will find that the freedom fighters in South Africa are out in force, bringing up the history of Brent Bozell and the fact that Brent Bozell was in fact against the ANC back in the 1980s. Who wasn't against the ANC back in the 1980s? The ANC was a legitimate terrorist organization, and it wasn't until Nelson Mandela effectively pledged that they would cease all of their militant actions that the world started to sort of declassify the ANC as a terrorist organization. But ultimately, the ANC is acting with incredible sort of arrogance towards the Americans here. Remember, let's go back. Brent Bozell says the American regime, the American administration is running out of patience with South Africa. I just told you what happens when President Trump runs out of patience. Where exactly is the ANC getting off? What does the ANC think will happen to protect them against an American assault. Now, what does that assault actually look like? Do I believe that America will actually invade South Africa militarily? I don't. South Africa, unlike Venezuela and unlike Iran, doesn't have a military. Our military is filled with hundreds of generals just getting a paycheck. There would be no point in trying to attack South Africa militarily, especially given the fact that South Africa has proven itself to be incredibly fragile and also volatile to international events. Look at what's happening to the Rand with the war in Iran. The Rand has erased all of the green shoots that we heard so much about in the last few months. Furthermore, oil is skyrocketing, and guess what? South Africa has no strategic reserves that can actually help us sort of survive the increase. And there's now sort of reports saying that we could be looking at about 30 Rand a liter at the end of next month. So clearly things are going swimmingly here in South Africa, but South Africa's market continues to be a market that is a slave to international events. This means that if you wanted to kill South Africa, or if you wanted to affect regime change in South Africa, there are far easier ways to do it. An economic war would effectively achieve the goal that you ultimately want to achieve, especially given the fact that the South African people, the majority at least of South African people, aren't nearly as radicalized as the government is. So there's a good chance that if you dialed up the heat on the ANC and you made life in South Africa so unbearable that the people can no longer survive, the people themselves will just overthrow the government. So that might be, from the position of the Americans, what they're sort of thinking of, right? We could just get the people to do the dirty work for us. I don't believe that you'll see a military invasion. I also don't believe that you'll see Cyril Ramaphosa whisked off in the middle of the night. And the reason for that is I see no evidence, and this America would see the same. There is no evidence that there is anyone in the ANC and in this regime that would be like Dalsey or Calci. It's Dalsey, right? The new minister, or the new the new president of Venezuela. I think it's Dalsey Rodrigo or something to that effect. But I don't see any evidence that there's anyone in this regime that will be sort of neutral. So taking off Cyril will just put Paul Mashatile in there, and he'll just go again, right? Yeben. So when I say overreact, I'm talking in terms of how President Trump acted in terms of how powerful Iran is, right? So I'm not saying President Trump overreacted in terms of this is a complete overreaction, how dare he? I'm saying America could probably have sent a tenth of that power and they still would have destroyed Iran, because America is the greatest superpower and military power in the world, right? Against Iran, that is a very dangerous enemy. But let's be real, the brunt of the American military, Iran can't stand against a tenth of that. So my comment that President Trump almost overreacted towards Iran was merely in terms of what he could probably have done from a bare minimum to send the same message. But what President Trump is doing now, by sending a very strong message, by making sure that the world sees America is not afraid to go all in, right? That sends another message. And I think that message is actually meant for China, but that's an entirely different discussion. So I'm not, in fact, saying that President Trump is just overreacting. That wasn't the point that I was making. Anyways, back to what I was saying. So the ANC, a Nicolas Maduro Venezuela solution, that doesn't work here. Military solution, sure, the American military could invade South Africa, but it would be the shortest invasion in the history of the world. Moreover, it would be much harder to justify internationally. With the Iranians, President Trump can justify the attack on Iran because Iran is an open military threat. With South Africa, what is the justification? South Africa isn't a military threat. South Africa is surely a threat from a terrorist perspective. I believe that there's a lot of terrorist activity and cartel activity that is happening in South Africa. So that is a threat. But South Africa doesn't have a military that allows it to expand power or to threaten American interests anywhere in the world. So a military solution would be much harder for South Africa. But an economic solution, that I can absolutely see. Now, the ANC is probably relying on, well, they used to rely on two things. The one was China and Russia. We have already discussed this to death. China and Russia did not react to Venezuela. They did not react to Iran. Both of these countries, from an economic and strategic perspective, far more important to China and Russia than South Africa. China and Russia is not coming to South Africa's defense. That's guaranteed. They will not come to South Africa's defense. In an economic war where President Trump does third-party embargoes, China and Russia would probably gladly cut off South Africa. If President Trump were to tell the Chinese, if you don't stop trade with South Africa, you will not trade with America, China will listen. That's just how it is. Because China is not going to sacrifice their own economy for South Africa's. That's never going to happen. And there's other ways that the Americans can do it as well. They could put up a blockade. If you look at how ships travel to South Africa, they all come along the African coast. A very quick military blockade of both axes completely isolates South Africa. So now suddenly ships can't reach South Africa in the first place. That would put significant pressure. There's actual other ways that the American government can do it. One of the ways would be to instruct all American banks to sell off all of their South African held debt. This would create a financial meltdown of epic proportions. If American banks are suddenly instructed that they can no longer hold South African debt, it would cause a run on the banks, because you will see every other country in the world start selling off their South African debt as well, because the South African rand is about to collapse. This happened to the apartheid government in the 1980s. It was overnight catastrophe of the rand. So there's a couple of angles that the Americans can follow through on. Now, what is the ANC hiding behind? China, Russia. I already explained how that's just a non-starter. They're not going to come to South Africa's aid. So the ANC, I think, has tried relentlessly to make themselves look irreplaceable to both the Chinese and the Russians. And I think there's a big argument to be made for this. One of the reasons South Africa took Israel to the ICC or the ICJ, and one of the reasons why South Africa condemned America with Iran, and one of the reasons South Africa has sided with Russia in the Ukraine conflict consistently over and over again, South Africa is desperately trying to prove to China and Russia, you need us. You need us. Look how helpful we're being. This, in spite of the fact that this has had severe consequences on the South African economy as well as the South African Republic, they don't care, because they understand if America were to start taking action, they will need Russia and China to help them. Russia and China isn't coming to their defense. So, bad news. The other thing, and this is where we get to the international law discussion that I really want to be having here. The South African government, at least a lot of the freedom fighters, still believe that international law is a thing that must be respected. They still have not realized that international law is dead. There is no such thing anymore. In fact, one might make the argument that that has never actually existed. There has never been such a thing as international law. The UN was an attempt at creating international law. The issue was that time and again, countries would break international law, and there was no one to enforce it, because America is the only country strong enough to actually enforce the law, which means that if America didn't want to enforce the law, then there was just no law, right? And you find continuously with China, Russia, South Africa, all of these axes of resistance ultimately used international law in order to protect themselves so that they could continue to be wicked, vile, and evil. I'll give you guys a great example of why international law doesn't work. Gun laws. If a government makes the argument that we're going to make all guns illegal, the only people that are affected by it are people who follow the law. Because the people who follow the law will hand in all of their guns. It has no effect on the criminals and the people who don't follow the law, who just don't give back their guns. Because now you're in a position where the criminals have guns and the people who followed the law have no guns, right? So taking guns is completely asinine because it punishes the law-abiding citizens. It does nothing to the criminals. International law very much plays out like this. Let's take South Africa as an example. It is legally wrong, internationally speaking. So if we're using international law, it is illegal to have race laws. You are allowed to have redress laws for past injustices, but the redress laws cannot be racial. So how does the ANC get around that tiny little issue? It's truly remarkable what Marxists can do with phrasing and wording. The ANC structures all of their race laws with the following two phrases: previously advantaged and previously disadvantaged. Race is mentioned nowhere. Yes, broadly we call it broad-based black economic empowerment. But if you look at the actual language of the law, it says previously advantaged and previously disadvantaged. And it's just by pure happenstance that all of the previously disadvantaged people that we qualify as disadvantaged are black, and all of the previously advantaged people that we qualify as advantaged are white. I'll give you guys a great example of how that law doesn't work. My grandfather left school at the age of 12 because his parents could no longer afford to keep him in school, and he became a bricklayer. My grandmother left school at the age of 11 and started working on the farm because her father was a farmer that couldn't afford to pay workers, so she had to take up the chores and stuff on the farm as well as her brothers. Both of my grandparents did not finish school. They were incredibly poor right up until, I believe, somewhere in their 30s, where my grandfather finally saved up enough money to buy himself a small little farm where he started to grow tobacco. This he was able to grow into 3 farms that grew tobacco until he lost his entire harvest to drought, which then forced him to go back to bricklaying in his 50s. That's my grandfather, white man, from Germany. Herman Mashaba. Herman Mashaba is a black man that grew up during apartheid South Africa, and with the help of the apartheid government and a lot of government grants, Herman Mashaba is able to build himself an empire that makes him a millionaire under apartheid rule. Who, in this scenario, is previously advantaged and who is previously disadvantaged? I think it's fair to say that every one of you will agree, if we're going by the word previously advantaged and previously disadvantaged, my grandfather was far more disadvantaged than Herman Mashaba. But of course, that's not how the ANC applies these laws. Herman Mashaba is previously disadvantaged purely based on the fact that he is black. My grandfather is previously advantaged purely based on the fact that he is white. But the language is important. You see, the language allows them to skirt international law and still apply racist, race-based laws in South Africa whilst facing zero consequences for it. President Trump realizes after his first term, international law is the thing that is broken. International law is the thing that doesn't work. Now, why? Why? For this, I need to take you all on a bit of an academic journey, if you will permit me. We're going to go into the realm of geopolitics. And I realize that this is going to be a little bit lecture-y, so forgive me for that, but this is the only way that I can do it. Broadly speaking, geopolitics is the attempt to make sense academically and intellectually of the movements of governments around the world. So when we look at geopolitical studies, we ask questions like, what is the reality on the ground of country X? What is the reality on the ground of country Y? And how does these two countries interact with one another based on the realities of X and Y? Right? And that's the study of geopolitics. Broadly speaking, there are two main schools of geopolitics today. There are hundreds, but today there are two main active schools of thought. Under them, there's a bunch of smaller ones, but these are the two major ones. The first is the one that I'm an adherent of. It's called Realpolitik or Realpolitik or Realpolitics. Now, Realpolitik suggests that you can determine how countries are going to act and interact with one another based on what is rational for a country to do. So if something happens in the world, I look at what was the rational reasons for what this country was doing and why they were doing it, and then I determine what their next steps will be based on what is rational from their perspective. A great example of how Realpolitik is applied to Russia-Ukraine, we have the following. From Ukraine's perspective, it is entirely rational for the Ukrainians to join NATO. They have on their eastern border a neighbor that is more powerful and larger than they are. And this neighbor has consistently tried to attack it, right? It has a history of invading and not being nice to the Ukrainian people. So Ukraine has a reason for wanting to be part of NATO. Ukraine, furthermore, has a reason for wanting to be part of the European Union because they're a small country. They have a lot of resources, but they're a small country, and being part of a larger trading bloc would really open up opportunities for the Ukrainian people. And so it is rational for Ukraine to seek membership of the European Union as well as membership of NATO. Now let's move to from the perspective of Russia. For the Russians, it is rational that they do not want NATO on their border. Why is that? Well, 3 times throughout history since the 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the Russians have asked for membership of NATO, and 3 times they were denied. Furthermore, 3 times President Vladimir Putin asked NATO to stop expanding towards their borders, and they were ignored every single time. From the perspective of Russia, they look at NATO expansion and they say, these guys were set up to fight the Soviet Union and stop the spread of communism in Europe. That was their chosen reason, their stated reason for existence. The Soviet Union is no more, and Russia is no more a communist country. We have asked for membership. We have been denied. We don't know why. Because we're no longer communist and we're no longer Soviets. So why did they deny us access to this organization? Furthermore, we have asked them to stop expanding towards our borders, and they have ignored every single one of those whilst ignoring our asks to be included. The only rational conclusion that the Russians can come to, this is an enemy organization. This is an organization that is trying to push into Russia. So from Russia's perspective, it is entirely rational that NATO cannot expand anymore. So Ukraine is perfectly rational in wanting to be part of NATO. Russia is perfectly rational in saying, hell no, that cannot happen. The only thing that is irrational is NATO's expansion towards the borders of Russia. Because, well, the Soviet Union no longer exists and Russia is no longer communist. So that is an irrational move. This is why Realpolitik says what Ukraine is doing makes sense, what Russia is doing makes sense, what NATO is doing makes less sense. And so this would now mean we have to go look, why is NATO? So we need to go find what is the rationality for NATO here. Why is NATO doing the thing that they're doing? So that's Realpolitik. Then you have a new school. This new school really starts in like the 1960s 60s, but it's small. It's sort of every other president in the United States that adheres to this new school of thought. But it finally comes to its fullness in the 1990s. It's called geoeconomics. Now, I made a video for Truth Report this morning on this entire topic, so I'm not going to go into that much detail. You can watch that video. I don't know when they'll air it, but you can watch that video when that video finally goes live. But geoeconomics basically takes what Karl Marx did with people, and it applies the Marxist overtone on countries. So Karl Marx, his philosophy of communism, boils humans down to Homo economicus. Human beings are merely a result, a product of their economic system. Karl Marx argues that all human beings are socialists at the foundational level. So human beings are socialists foundationally. And he looks at history and he says all of these tribes were all socialists. Of course, it ignores everything we know about history, but that's his assertion. So he says, once you include things like private ownership and private enterprise and private capital, human beings get violent and greedy. So, if you want human beings to go back to peace and prosperity and not destroying each other, you have to bring them back to the baseline that is socialism. In other words, Homo economicus. So humans aren't naturally greedy. Humans are only greedy because of capitalism. If you remove capitalism, the greed goes away. The Soviet Union had 70 years to prove to us that that is not possible. And millions, hundreds of millions of people died later, or tens of millions of people died later. That still didn't happen. So Karl Marx was disproved right there. Geoeconomics seeks to apply what Karl Marx saw in the people on the international stage to countries. Geoeconomics says that countries will only ever act in their economic interest. And so we can have peace on earth if everyone is rich. So if everyone makes money, we can have peace on earth. And this is super important when you look at the rise of China. The Americans deem this geoeconomics as the future, and it decides to make China rich. Because the belief is that if China becomes rich, it will become democratic, and then it will be free, and then China will join the rest of the world, and everyone will just be free. The same argument goes, this is why Barack Obama relaxes sanctions on Iran, gives them back their $6 billion, and sort of tries to work with the Iranian people, because Barack Obama, from a geoeconomic perspective, believes that once Iran starts making money and actually starts to prosper, the Iranian people will just become friends again, and everyone will just relax and enjoy themselves. The issue is that we see throughout every single encounter, geoeconomics not only fails to explain the actions that follow, but it also fails to explain the motivations of those that actually do it. Geoeconomics is as wrong as Karl Marx was about economics. It doesn't actually work. President Trump, on the flip side, is an adherent of Realpolitik. And Realpolitik says the following. If a country does not want to do as I say, and if a country is presenting a significant threat to my prosperity, then at some point that country has to be changed. In other words, if the negotiations are going nowhere, change the negotiator. It's as simple as that. You and I are not seeing eye to eye, bam, next. Let's you and me talk. Right, let's come to... basically, Realpolitik is that famous gangster line. I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. That's Realpolitik. Realpolitik says the strong do what they want, the weak suffer what they must. If you're a strong nation, if you're a world superpower, you have the right to impose your will upon other people. You have the right to do so. You are the superpower, and you are allowed to say, this is what's good for me, if you're not doing what's good for me, you're an enemy. And we need to get you out of the way. Right? It is. It's might makes right. That's literally the modern day equivalent of the strong do what they want, the weak suffer what they must, is might makes right. This is realpolitik at its finest. It's strongman politics. That's the new world order that we exist in. And it's not even the new world order, because that is the world order that we have existed in always, right? That's always been the reality of the world. And it has had its chaotic moments, but it's also had peaceful moments, and it's also had really good moments. So fundamentally, that is where President Trump is heading back to. So South Africa and the ANC, failing to understand what is the reality on the ground, is now in a new game. And after this, I'll start hearing what you guys have to say. But I want to reveal this to you because it is important. One of the first things that you start seeing when it comes to these axis of resistance regimes is an immediate appeal to legitimacy. And we're starting to see the ANC do something very interesting. And this is now becoming a pattern. Once could be an accident. Twice, it's starting to look a little bit dodgy. 3 times, now it's a pattern. Every single time South Africa and the race-based policies of the ANC has become international news, the media has stepped up to the plate. The first example was this one. You guys remember this? The not in our name letter. Now, the not in our name letter was literally a week later by Rapport, another newspaper in the country, confirmed to be an industry plant. The letter itself was penned and written by Durko. The 44 or 40 prominent Afrikaners that signed the letter were leftists, and most of them were paid government shills. The letter itself had no legitimacy, except it allowed the ANC a tool that they could use to push back against what they deemed President Trump's lies. Now, something interesting happened around this letter. The letter comes out and it is published in News 24. Within an hour, thousands of accounts are retweeting and reposting this letter all over the place. It's literally everywhere. And everyone is saying how President Trump is lying. Look at South Africans pushing back. These white South Africans are standing up for the unity of South Africa. And it sort of drowns out. Once they realize that they've been found out, the letter dies. News 24 never says anything about the letter again. Daily Maverick and all of these guys immediately shut the hell up because they realize, ooh, okay, we've been found out, but it sort of has the desired effect. A lot of people throughout the world saw these Afrikaners write this letter and they thought, oh, so most white people don't necessarily agree. It's fine, right? That's what the ANC needed, and it had its desired effect. Then, of course, we have what's happened now. Now, there's another example of this that happened where President Trump started pointing out with the G20. You guys remember the G20 events where President Trump boycotted the G20, and suddenly you saw all of these media articles speak about the amazing G20 that the ANC had launched and how incredibly happy the people of South Africa was with hosting the G20. And just what a major success it was, even though by all accounts, it not only was not really a successful G20, it was the same as all other G20s. There was literally no special thing about this G20. And ultimately, it just cost us a whole bunch of money, and we still don't even know how much money it really cost us. But the media was there, and everyone was retweeting it. Legitimacy. Keep this in mind. A regime with its back on the rope, with its back to the ropes, seeks desperately legitimacy. And we're going to get to why in a second. I'm building up to it. So now we're in the media again. Brent Bozell and his remarks have put South Africa front and center. And this time, what's very interesting is a lot of the international papers and outlets aren't as critical of Brent Bozell. a lot of the outlets are actually just relaying the news. They're not taking a side or pushing too much of their own opinions into it. And then you see Reuters. Reuters quickly after this is March 11th. That's yesterday at 8 a.m. That's a day after the remarks by Brent Bozell. A day later, Reuters comes out with an article. Now listen to this. Trump says white South Africans are persecuted. Some are returning to a better life. Now you will read this and you'll think, whoa, these refugees are coming back? Whoa, it's not even been that long and the refugees are already coming back? Trust me, this is how the freedom fighters of this country has marketed it. Every single one of the freedom fighters that are now pushing for this are all claiming that this is the refugees are returning. The white refugees are realizing that America's Trump isn't that great. Trump's America isn't that great, and they want to return to South Africa instead. Interestingly, however, and this was a letter by Conscious Caracal over on X, an article that he wrote. Very, very good article. If you have not read it already, I would highly recommend that you do. But he actually debunks the article. You see, the problem with this article, it states that thousands are returning. They asked 3 South Africans. 3. Not a single one of the 3 South Africans that want to return, and one of them have already returned, are part of the refugee program. In fact, the first guy that wants to return it has been in California since 2003. He left South Africa in 2003, and he now wants to return. What he's arguing is life is cheaper in South Africa, which is true. FYI, if you've made all of your money in America, if you're like upper middle class in America, you're super rich in South Africa. And if you're super rich in South Africa, you can live in a security estate. You can go only to malls with heavy security that is really off limits to most of the ordinary plebs and the poor people. You can really live out like a king here in South Africa, right? So Veit is his name. He's among, according to them, 12,000 people that check their citizenship status. These are not 12,000 people that want to return to South Africa. These are just 12,000 people that check their citizenship. It might be people who's just coming to visit family. And they want to figure out, am I a citizen of South Africa still, or am I not? Do I need to apply for a visa, or can I still come with my ID? Right? So there's no evidence that these 12,000 people actually want to return to South Africa for good. He's just one of the people that checked it, and then they asked him, and he said, yeah, I want to return for reasons. Another one is this lady here, and I have no problem making her famous. She sold herself out to the media. She wants to be posted about, and so I'm happy to talk about her. At least according to how they're framing it, Naomi and Danny Sapphire do not agree that white people have it bad or that there is any persecution or oppression of white people in South Africa. They made their money in America. They lived in America for about 2 decades. And while she says that she loved America and America has been incredibly good to her, she's now ready to start her hardship South African life in the beautiful Plettenberg Bay. Again, you can make a lot of money in America and come and retire in South Africa and live like a king for the rest of your life because the dollar is a hell of a lot stronger than the rand. You don't have to deal with the problems, and Plettenberg Bay doesn't have a lot of the problems that ordinary South Africans deal with every single day. Another one is a lady that they don't actually say from where she's coming or how long she's been out of the country, but again, she's not a refugee. And here's the truth about these 3 people that they actually bring up. All 3 of these people work remotely for overseas companies. So a big chunk of the complaint that white people have in this country is the fact that they can't get jobs because they're white. These 3 people that they've spoken to don't have to worry about that because they're working remotely for overseas companies. Right? So they're not actually coming back to South Africa for the opportunities that South Africa gives them. They're just coming back because it's easier to live like a king in South Africa than it is to live like a middle-class person in America. and they can leave afterwards because they all have green cards to America. So if things really go wrong, they can just go back, right? The other bit of evidence that they point, and Conscious Caracal actually points this out in his article as well, is a Facebook group where they found about 10 people that claimed that they want to come back to South Africa. 7 of the 10 people don't even live in America, they live in Europe. And again, they're not people who left as refugees. But the article comes out, and it is again posted all over social media. Within an hour of the article coming out, everywhere is talking about just how incredible life is in South Africa for white people and how much lying Trump is doing about the genocide in South Africa. Because look at these thousands of refugees that want to return to South Africa. The article itself has no evidence that thousands of refugees want to return. The article itself has no evidence that any of the refugees want to return, but in phrasing it correctly, it's able to legitimize the ANC's pushback against President Trump. I have no doubt that Nally Payton and Tim Cox, probably funded by the ANC, or at least the ANC reached out to journalists that they knew would be sympathetic to their plight. And again, Nicholas, thank you so much for the 35 Rand, dude. Really appreciate you. And it is my absolute pleasure. These are things that I think is important for us to talk about and for you guys to know. So yeah, it's my pleasure. And thank you so much for the financial support. I really appreciate that, sir. And then finally, we go to this. The ultimate call to legitimacy. Fikile Mbalula has a call on all patriots to unite in the People's March. Now, there's a common held truth that I think is super important for everyone to remember. Anything that is called the People's never has anything to do with the people. The People's Republic of China, the People's Republic or the Democratic Republic of Congo, the People's Army, the People's Militia, the People's anything. If it's the people, it has nothing to do with the people. It's just political talk for the government's about to take a lot of your rights away. So they're calling for the People's March in defense of our sovereignty and democratic gains. Let's be clear. South Africa's sovereignty is not under attack. No one has taken South African sovereignty away. South Africa is sovereign and free to make its own sovereign decisions. But South Africa is also free. In fact, it's so free that it's also allowed to suffer the consequences of those decisions. That's all this is. It's the actions meeting their consequences. And the democratic gains, I'm not entirely sure what he's referring to. But why does this matter? Why is this important to the ANC? It is again that appeal to legitimacy. If the ANC can muster 1 million march, right? And we know that this is going to work. They're going to pay a bunch of ANC cadres to go and march. But if they can get 1 million people to march in the streets against what they deem lies of the Trump administration, this gives them legitimacy. Then when America finally does act against South Africa, as South Africa deserves because of their insolence and arrogance in dealing with America, the ANC is hoping that they can use this legitimacy to call out to the international community for support. To say, look, we are only doing what our people is asking us to do. And I believe that there is more to this. The ANC will ultimately use these articles, things like the Prominent 44, things like refugees, not refugees, but the framing that refugees are returning from America. And then ultimately this march will be used by the ANC to punish those of us who are actively speaking out. This is a legitimate fear that I have. It's a legitimate fear that I've had for a while. And it's something that I've spoken about previously. I genuinely believe that the ANC will, within the next year, pass all of the legislation necessary, because some of the legislation is already in the works, but all of the legislation necessary for them to police thought online. This means that podcasters like myself, podcasters like Ronaldo Gous, organizations like Truth Report, like AfriForum, like Solidarity, this will become illegal. The kind of live streams we have here will be deemed illegal. It will be the spreading of disinformation, misinformation, and more importantly, it will be deemed an attack on the sovereignty of South Africa and therefore no longer allowed. I genuinely believe that this is coming. I believe that with all my heart. But okay, that ends the official conversation and the official coverage that I wanted to go through today. Now we turn to you, arguably the most important part of this channel, you the viewer. Do you have thoughts? Do you have places where you disagree with me? Things that you think I may have missed, or maybe I'm not seeing it as much? Give me your thoughts, boys. Let me hear what you guys have to say. Just get live chat going again. International law is stupid. Lucids, I cannot agree with you more. Cannot agree with you more. International law is stupid, but international law doesn't exist. It's a misnomer, right? It's a way to make countries that are vastly inferior allow them to feel a bit good about themselves, right? There's an international rules-based order, and we're all going to be governed by this exact same body. The biggest issue is that countries live and exist in an anarchic system. It is anarchy on the world stage, because there is no power above it. If you think about ordinary citizens like you or I, we live in a country where if you do something to me, I can go to the courts and the courts can punish you for what you just did to me. This doesn't exist in the international arena. There, ultimately, if I can do it, I can do it, right? And if you can't stop me, there's nothing you can do unless you can get a bunch of countries together that is powerful enough to stop me. But otherwise, you'll play by my rules, and that's the end of it. Without faith in a higher power does not work for me. Strength without faith in a higher power does not work for me. Harley Quinn, what are we talking about? That is interesting. Whenever we talk about faith, that is actually the stream for tomorrow. If nothing changes, tomorrow's stream will actually be, can Christians support war? There's a number of things that I want to say about that, and it's something that I've been thinking about and sort of researching for a while. So I'll be making a video about that. Fake news is at it again. They never stopped the BS. The only people I knew who ever came back to South Africa was for family, and except for one family, they all returned to the US, Australia within 2 years. Avia, I think what's oftentimes missed in a lot of these conversations, and you're absolutely correct on that, what happens quite often with people who go to other countries is they don't understand, and I made a video, I did a whole live stream, should you go or should you stay, where I had the same, if you have certain things that's bothering you here in South Africa that are about you, right? So let's say, for example, you're married and your marriage is on the rocks, right? Things are not easy between you and your wife or you and your husband. Moving to another country isn't going to fix that. The problems that allowed your country to fail or your marriage to fail is still going to exist there, right? If you're unhappy with who you are as a person, another country is not going to fix that. If you're unhappy with the current state of South Africa and the way South Africa is run and the way South Africa is governed, that's a different story. Moving to another country will actually free you from those problems because that other country will not have that problem. But then also, and very important, people have this idea that they're moving to fantasy land, right? I'm moving to the greatest land on the planet and I'm just going to have the greatest life ever. Americans have problems too. Their problems might not be the same as ours, but they have problems too. Life isn't always, sunshine and roses in America. There are bad, heartache, breaking hearts, bad economic moments. All of that stuff is going to be true there as well. So people sort of, and then what happens is people go to Australia, they go to America, they go to the UK, they go to Europe, and they hate it there because all of the problems that they were trying to escape exists there as well, just in different forms. And then they go, well, I'll come back. It's once they come back that they realize, well, actually, there might be problems there, but they're a hell of a lot better than the problems here. And then they go, because I also know a bunch of people who left, came back, and ultimately left again. Because once they were here, they had to admit to themselves, this country is falling apart. This is not a workable solution. I'm still really interested in that South African prophet. That was a great video. Gamers Republic, how you doing, sir? Siner or Seer van Rensburg. That video is going to take a while. You guys have to give me time. I'm waiting for one of the books that I ordered to get here. It's a book written by a professor. I can't remember his name now. I have to now go and read every single one of his prophecies. And it's actually very hard because there's no one place to find all of his prophecies because they're sort of in books. So I have Adrian Snyman's book already that I've been working through. And then this professor, and then just going to have to do a lot of research because I don't want to read people's opinions about his visions. That's the one thing. I'm not reading Adrian's opinions. I don't care what his opinions are. I'm reading the visions, and then I'm going from first principles and thinking through them. Right? Because I'm not saying you should believe everything Sinner saw. I'm not, selling it as the gospel. But if I'm going to make a determination about what Seer saw about South Africa, I would like for me to be the guy that interprets it rather than just telling you what Adrian Snyman said. I might, after I've come up with my own interpretations of his visions, I might go and give you in the video, this is what I think Sinner saw, this is what Adrian Snyman said Sinner saw, and this is what that professor saw, and this is what Johanna Brandt saw. I might do that, give you everyone's interpretation, and then you can ultimately decide what interpretation you like best. But that's going to take a while. So don't expect that because there's a lot of other things that I'm working on as well. So, it's going to be a while before we get back to another Sinner video. The answer is yes, but there would be criteria such as defending the innocent, etc., etc. Nephilim, yes, but there's more to it that I want to discuss. So that's going to be tomorrow's discussion. I think it's going to be a fun one. Freedom to move should not be an issue, but group thought should not be governed, forced. Let's be frank. What do you mean? Freedom to move. Good topic in Christian support war. Just war theory was created by Saint Augustine of Hippo, a super-based Christian. But of course, things change, right? So you look, for example, at Paul the Apostle. Paul the Apostle tells slaves to be good slaves and to treat their masters with respect and to submit to their masters as unto the Lord. He tells slave owners that they should treat their slaves with respect and dignity. And then Paul goes on to say, because in Christ there is no free nor captured, no slave, no free, no man, no woman, no this, no that. We are all equal under Christ. So, at the time that Paul is making this argument, it is unthinkable for that mind to imagine a world without slavery. Slavery is everywhere. They are so used to it. They have been slaves themselves. They have had slaves. Slaves even don't think of a world where slavery cannot exist. So Paul operates within that legal framework and makes a case, the best possible case, to lead people to Christ. Because if a slave owner has, say, 10 slaves and one of the slaves is a Christian, and that Christian slave works harder, has more respect, treats the slave owner with more dignity than any of the other slaves, the slave master might be inclined to start wondering, why is this slave so different to all of the other slaves? And that might be a signal for the slave owner to become a Christian. And then the slave owner has this from Paul, be kind and good and humane towards your slaves, right? Because there is no such thing as free and slave in Christ. And so, it's about expanding the church. So things change. And so I get that early Christians had this view of war and they okayed it, but I want to take a fresh look at it, share some Bible verses from my perspective on how I think Christians should be looking at war. Okkie, hoe gaan dit met jou? Wat wil jy wat ek vir jou sê in Afrikaans? Ek praat Afrikaans, ek praat Engels, dis my enigste tale. Ek kan 'n bietjie sê in German, so ek kan sê guten Tag, guten Abend, and that's about it. And I think I can say a phrase in Sepedi, which is Tubela, Awaragana Wanukai. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I think it's part of saying hello. or good tubela, I think is a low, and then you say rechai, tubela rechai, and then you say awarechona wena ukai. I think something to that, or wena rechai. I'm not sure, but I know that verse from when I was younger. He also says that if you, as a slave, can get free, get free. Yes, but determining, I'm not making an argument here against slavery, because what Paul did was ultimately lay the foundation for what would, about 1,700 years later, it would lead to the freeing of slaves en masse, right? Those who were for abolishment of slavery used the words of Paul to abolish slavery. So while Paul was writing within his period of time, within the moral system of his time, he was already laying the Christian foundations for why slavery was incredibly wrong. And you even have examples of this in the earliest days, like the 2nd century. You have Christians already asking the question, is it permissible? Should Christians ever own slaves? Right. So you see this from very early on. They start debating and arguing about this. So yeah, I'm not making an argument for or against slavery. Hey, bro, it's so encouraging how you're bold in speaking about Christ and our faith. Reinhard, how you doing, sir? From my perspective, Christ is why I do what I do, right? And Reinhard, I know you. You're in my church, so happy to see you, bro. I hope you're having a good day. But Christ is why I do what I do. Right? I got into politics because I became a Christian. And so for me, the only thing that I'm always afraid of, and I hope that people like you, Reinhard, and also, Peter and the other people at church would always guard me against this and sort of call me to account if I ever do it. The last thing I want to do is preach the political gospel. Right? My idea isn't to preach Christ because my viewers happen to be Christian. My idea is to glorify Christ in what I do because it's about him. That's literally why I do what I do. If I ever thought for even a moment that what I do isn't glorifying Christ and isn't adding to the kingdom of Christ, I would stop doing it immediately. I would just go back to playing video games for a living, because at least there I'm not screwing things up. Might be out of your wheelhouse to talk in depth about, but I would like to hear your thoughts on Chinese domestic events right now. China Observer on YouTube is reporting Xi is going to ground in West Beijing. So Gigi Evan, I'm not an expert on China. I will admit that. Specifically not China domestic affairs. I mean, I'm not even, I would say, an expert on geopolitics. I'm a student of geopolitics. I love geopolitics. So there's two things that I'm super passionate about, right? From outside of Christianity and faith. But there's two things that I'm super passionate about. The one is economics and the other is geopolitics. Right? I'm super passionate about it. Ordinary politics, like domestic politics, as you guys can see on my channel as well, I cover it, but not always, right? Because the parliament once again decided some stupid crap isn't always something that I find ridiculously interesting. And so I only cover it when it's really of importance to us here in South Africa. And it's going to affect our lives. Otherwise, I just leave parliament to do what they do. Same reason why I sparsely cover the Madlanga Commission, because I know nothing's going to happen there. Right? I know nothing's going to happen there. I know nothing's going to happen with the ad hoc committee. And so I only cover, again, the things that you should know, absolutely. Otherwise, I couldn't care less. I'm far more interested in geopolitics, international politics. So from an international perspective, I understand China pretty well. But domestically, very difficult. What I will say, which is super interesting to me, China is getting ready to pass a new law. This new law is called... Oh, I need to see. I think I took a screenshot of this new law. Let me just see. Because it has something to do with the redress of something or the other. China is set to approve new law promoting ethnic unity. Now, effectively, China is taking a page from the ANC's book, because the new law will effectively make it illegal not to be Han. Now, for those of you that don't know, there's over 50 cultural minorities in China. So China is in fact not just one country. China is made up of over 50 cultural groups. So think here in South Africa, you have the Sepedis and the Zulus and the Xhosas and the Vendas and all those. Now think 53, I think. So you have the Uyghurs and you have the Han and you have the Tibetans. And each of these groups are very different. They're not the same. This new law effectively makes it so that if you're a parent of, say, for example, a Uyghur Chinese person, you must teach your child about the Han dynasty and the Han cultural practices. And furthermore, you must teach your child that the Russian Communist Party is good. You must. It is illegal not to do that. Moreover, the argument is that they're trying to force interracial marriage or intercultural marriage. So they're trying to make the law so that you can't go from one part of the country to another to go marry someone that is part of your tribe. You have to marry someone that is not part of your tribe, because they're trying to get everyone towards Han, so that everyone ultimately joins the Han cultural group. This is now a law that China is busy with. So I know that part of it, but I only know the broad strokes. I don't know the actual ins and outs of it. So, whatever happens there happens. The confusion is that people think they're free. We cannot be owned by people because we are owned by God, and He's slave. As He's slaves, He has a legal claim on His followers. Saint, how are you doing, sir? Yes. Technically speaking, we are owned by God, right? And yes, from a Christian perspective, people can't own people because people belong to God, And so, how could you own me if I belong to God? So yeah, that is to some extent true. Although I would also say the slavery that you're referring to when it comes to God is actually the thing that makes you free. So I was baptized this Sunday. After about 2 years of negotiating and debating and not being convinced, I was baptized this Sunday at my church. And in my testimony, this is exactly what I said. When I was in the world, I genuinely believed that I was free because I could do whatever I want. And then I would look at Christians and I would be like, they're slaves to this book, The problem is that sin never makes you free. I am yet to see any evidence. I'm yet to see a single shred of evidence of sin making anyone free, because it sure as hell did not make me free. You become a slave to your sin, and you're ultimately just walking, mindlessly trying to satisfy your sins. And you start breaking rules, you start breaking hearts, you start breaking people, relationships, yourself, all in the pursuit of satisfying more and more of your own natural desires. And then when you come to Christ, you realize that I'm finally free. So it's an interesting thing. The closer you come to Christ, the freer you get. Even though technically speaking, from the outside, it actually looks as if you're becoming more sort of chained, right? In a way. If you love geopolitics, it will be worth looking into what has happened in the relationship between Taiwan and Japan. They have been strengthening ties diplomatically and militarily. So Lamborghini, I already know about that, already following it. Japan, I think, is already aware of what China is up to. They know that China wants to move on Taiwan. And obviously, from China's perspective, they can't lose Taiwan. Right? China understands that Taiwan falls to China. Japan is in big trouble. Because it's going to force Japan to effectively submit to Chinese authority from that moment forward, and the Chinese are obviously not interested in that. So yeah, no, I'm aware of that. It's incitement to violence. Also, the fact that politicians are using it as rally calls should make it illegal. Very much agree with that. So, ladies and gentlemen, on a final note, is there anything else that you guys want me to talk about? Anything you want to bring up to me? Anything that you want to agree or disagree with before I call it? Because I still have to go buy some food and then die of the heat because, well, that's a thing that's happening at the moment here. But yeah, is there anything that I haven't spoken about that we should have been speaking about? That I should have been bringing up? Anything that you guys want to bring up, bring to my attention? CCS, the heat's insane, right? And the problem is the maintenance guys can only get to me on Monday. They can only get to me on Monday, which is literally killing me. So you didn't get your loaf of caters? I did not. And CR, thank you so much for all the hearts. Love you too. Thank you so much. Thanks, Devon, from a puddle of sweat in Cape Town. Antari, I feel you. So last night, I slept without an aircon because it's only last week, or maybe like the week before that the aircon started to go out. But it was still sort of cooling things down. It was just not cooling things all the way down, right? Lamborghini with the 70 Rand donation. Really appreciate you, sir. You are far too kind. And also, you're forcing me to stay online even though I wanted to go buy food. But I thank you for the money. That I really appreciate. Thank you so much for the donation, sir. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Show for the insights and interesting geopolitics. It is my absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for the support. The financial support that you guys give me genuinely means a lot. It means that I can cover the things that I care about rather than having to or being forced to cover what's popular. You'll notice that, I sometimes make videos that don't get as many views. And that's thanks to your financial support. I can focus on what I think matters rather than just, like a headless chicken running after the next big story. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for the donation. I'm a white English speaker, but can pass as an Afrikaner. Where do I fit in? Harley Quinn, my view of Afrikaners is probably a little bit different to a lot of people. Well, it's definitely different to a lot of people. So my view of Afrikaners is that anyone who cares about freedom, anyone who cares about about the individual, about liberty and the right to the pursuit of happiness, in my opinion, is an Afrikaner. I don't view Afrikaner purely as a racial thing or purely as a cultural thing. Yes, Afrikaners speak Afrikaans, right? And all Afrikaans-speaking people are technically Afrikaners. But when I talk about Afrikaners, I tend to talk about the group that cares about freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not Afrikaans speakers. Because then Max de Pre is an Afrikaner. And I do not believe that Max de Pre is in fact an Afrikaner. So yeah, from my perspective, you're an Afrikaner. It also stands to reason that every girlfriend I've ever had is English. So if I was just about the Afrikaner people, I guess that would be a really bad sign. So it's probably best that I have a bit more of an expanded view on what an Afrikaner is or what an Afrikaner isn't. Just saying hi, 100%. Have a good day. Ryan, really appreciate you being here, man. How you doing? Josie is part of South Africa. Cape Town is part of Europe. King, I mean, in terms of what it feels like, absolutely. Your substation blew yesterday afternoon, so we had no power last night, no fan, mosquitoes bitten. Oh, wow. Andari, that sucks. That sucks. I don't know what part of Cape Town you're in, but substations blowing up really sucks. No, for me, it's just my aircon. Ferorius, how you doing, sir? The aircon is killing me. And the quickest they can get to me is Monday. So I'm legitimately sitting here. This fan is blowing like crazy. And my back is wet. I'm hot. It is insanity at the moment. So yeah, I wish there was a way for me to get this aircon fixed faster. You are grateful to be a Cape Townian. Service delivery is extra. King, I will say service delivery from the DA, sure, but okay, I'm gonna make a lot of Cape Townians a bit angry here. What I miss, seriously miss, about Gauteng and about the North is hustle culture. You phone an electrician in Pretoria. That guy will get to your house even if it's 10 o'clock tomorrow night or tonight. You phone that guy, he'll get to your house today. You're in Cape Town, you phone a guy 8 o'clock this morning, and he'll be like, oh, I don't know about that. You know, I have learned that when you want an electrician to actually come to your house, you have to phone them every single day, and even then, at minimum a week. At minimum a week. It's rough. Renoster, how are you doing? I was drawn to your account due to your boldness in the Lord. Rest is part and parcel of a true born-again believer. Truth, justice, compassion, etc. Renoster, thank you so much. I truly appreciate that. And I'm very happy to have you here, brother. The northern suburbs are having issues with substations. What the hell is going on there? The devil doing most for the Jew right now. So yeah, hell Satan, not Hitler. I don't understand this obsession with Israel and the Jews. I don't. I'm sorry, I just do not. It seems to me that there's a lot of people captured by anti-Jewish rhetoric that makes no sense to me. So if someone can at some point explain that to me, that'd be very helpful. Andre, I would say the DA is very competent. The question that keeps me up at night is competent with what? I'm a white English chap, but read and write Afrikaans. My great-grandfather was Afrikaans. I did 4 years in the SADF in total. Marco, I think, and you're black. Again, T, why would you think your race has an impact on me? I will tell you this much. You being black means literally nothing to me. Nothing. Because it doesn't tell me anything about you. You thinking that the Jews are evil and from the devil, that tells me a lot about you. But your race, not so much. No, Marco, not you. I'm talking to T Neo M Pax. That decided to let me know that the Jews are evil and also he is black. And then said, Hail Satan, for reasons that is unbeknownst to me. Boldness is sexy. Antari, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know if you meant that towards me, Antari, but I'm just going to take that as a compliment towards me. If you don't mind, I'll be vain in that regard and just say thank you very much. I just don't see Jordan Lewis as a good leader. Hy is nog nat agter die ore. I don't necessarily think the problem with Jordan Lewis is a lack of expertise. Again, my biggest question is, what kind of politician are you? Because, I mean, there's plenty of competent politicians out there. It doesn't mean they're good politicians. And that's the thing that scares me. If Jordan Lewis was an actual capitalist that cared about the capital markets and cared about freedom of people, I would love to vote for him. But I have a feeling Jordan Lewis isn't a capitalist. I don't think Jordan Lewis is for freedom. I think Jordan Lewis is a bit of a socialist, if you ask me. Lola came to Joburg to manage the renovation with a CT team. The Oaks were in shock at having to move their asses. Harley Quinn, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised. I think Cape Townians, look, I'll be honest with you, after you've been in Cape Town for a little bit, you start to adopt a little bit of that sort of sleepy, chilled out thing. I'll be honest, it is a very relaxed life. So for me, 5 o'clock in the afternoons, I head down to the beach. I go sit there, I have a coffee, and I just look out over the ocean, right? In the mornings, right off the gym, from about 7 o'clock, I'm at the beach. I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the ocean, I'm praying, and I'm just sort of in my own thoughts. You can't do that in Pretoria. You can't do that in Johannesburg, right? So you fall into this sort of, it becomes more relaxed. Everyone gets a little bit more relaxed. No one really chases each other around. And you kind of understand. Look, the guy wants to go surfing at 3 o'clock. You can't expect the man to just, come fix your, fix your electrical problems at 3 o'clock. So yeah, there is definitely a sense that the longer you stay here, the more you go, it's fine. We'll just make it work. I'm a proud member of the Always Sleepy Club. Jesus was a Jew, just saying. Problem with the DA is that they are competent in implementing the NWO policies in South Africa. The ANC is at least incompetent doing that, although they have the same objective from their NWO masters. Yeah, I think the biggest difference between the ANC and the DA, the ANC believe in some things from the World the World Economic Forum, but there's still very much adherents of sort of old school communism. The DA has fully embraced new age communism, the sort of stakeholder capital model where corporations are allowed, but the corporations answer to the government, and that sort of balances things out. And so I think fundamentally for the DA, or at least a lot of the leaders within the DA, and I don't think this is true of all DA members, but I think there's a significant number of them. There's a significant movement within the DA that genuinely believes in socialism. Where they and the ANC disagree is the level to which things should be nationalized. So while they do believe in the nationalization of a lot of things, the DA probably believes in the why can't I say this word? Corporatization. There we go. Oh my goodness, it's been too long. We've been streaming for way too long. Carl, thank you so much for the 700 Rand donation, you absolute beast. And thank you also for interrupting me, because that word just wouldn't out. So thank you for giving me a break so that I can sort of say thank you to you and I don't have to make a fool of myself the whole time. I really appreciate you so much, Carl. Thank you so much. That donation means the world to me. Love your content. Thanks for your insight into the vast array of topics. Appreciate you, Carl van der Black, from Food Sock Meals. Carl, thank you so much for that. And please send me an email, Carl, with what you guys do, Food Sock Meals. Sounds interesting. I would love to learn a bit more about that. So please do so. Okay. The DA wants to corporatize this state, right? So rather than the state providing electricity, you have a corporation that provides the electricity and the state merely manages the corporation. So very much the Chinese model. The ANC wants the state to provide the electricity. So I think they agree on the foundational socialist model. They disagree on how it should look at the end. That's the thing that they disagree on. So yeah. Go buy some food stuff, Shay, man. It's fine. I mean, I don't even know what I'm going to buy. Dude, I'm sorry that I'm sharing all of my bad luck with all of you now, but it needs to out. So in the last week, a lot of things have gone wrong for me. My aircon broke, and then of course, well, it didn't break, but it needs to go maintenance, and I think it needs to be cleaned. I think it's blocked. but the aircon is no longer making cold, and then of course we have a heat wave, which is such amazing timing. But now we have a heat wave, and I'm sitting here with no air conditioner. Air conditioner is the right word, right? Yeah, air conditioner. And then what's even worse, and I do actually think this is even worse. Um, on Friday, yeah, it was Friday. I'm making chips in the oven. You know, like chips, normal chips. I'm making the chips in the oven. I'm coming upstairs and I'm looking at. I can't remember. I was researching something, and eventually I walk downstairs to get my chips, and I see the oven is off, but I just assumed the oven had reached temperature and it goes off. Right, the light goes off when it's on temperature. So I just assumed okay, and I turn it off and I take my chips. It's ready. I come upstairs. I eat, and on Sunday, I want to bake. No, on Monday, I want to bake bread. And I turn on the oven and I go, oven's dead. This is what made me think of the electrician. Because I phoned the electrician on Monday. It is now Thursday. My oven is still not fixed. Do you have any idea how limiting it is in what you can eat without an oven? And last month, my air fryer broke, and I've been too lazy to replace it. I say too lazy, too stingy, and too lazy. When I buy stuff, I want to buy the best that money can buy. And so a good, decent air fryer is very expensive. So I need to save up a few months before I can buy the air fryer. So now I don't have an air fryer, but now I also don't have an oven. The oven hopefully can just be fixed. I don't need to buy a new one because that's going to be insane. Now all I have is my pans that I can cook with, but that immediately limits so much of what you can actually cook. Like what can you actually make? It's just nuts. So yeah, that's my week. By the way, that's the week that I've been having thus far. It's amazing. That's where you need food socks. You don't need an oven. In fact, just a microwave or a pot. Call. That sounds good. That sounds good. That's what I'm asking. Please email me. Please email me. I'd love to see what these food socks are all about. If it's natural ingredients and there's no sugar in it, I'd happily give it a go. Like if I don't have to cook every single day, I'd love to. I love cooking, but I don't always have time for it. So please send me an email, and hey, maybe we can work something out with a spot on the channel if it's something that you want more people maybe to see it. C says no. I've been driving to my brother's house to bake my bread, so I'm probably gonna drive to his house again tomorrow, and just go bake it there, and then come back. Hopefully, the electrician comes tomorrow, or maybe it's still today. Although it's already 2:00 in Cape Town, he's probably off surfing already. But who knows, right? Maybe the electrician can show up. T Neo, I'm gonna say goodbye to you, sir. It's been fun having you around, but you seem hell bent on just being offensive. And while I don't mind offensive people, like you're allowed to say offensive things on my channel, if you're literally just trying to go put a snake on the cross, you're trying to offend Christians, you're trying to offend white people. It seems like you're hell bent on being a little bit racist. So go do that somewhere else. I'm sure there's a lot of places that would love and welcome your particular brand of stupidity. Also suffered badly when I was living in SA. I know what it's like. Oh, yeah, Marco. Yeah, he's been removed now. As you guys know, I don't remove people easily, but yeah. It's soy-based, but it's great. We have it 3 times a week. Yeah, I don't know. My email is askacolon. Let me write it out for you. There you go. The power of the ban button. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't like employing bands, but sometimes it's necessary. So then, this is what will happen. But yeah, please send it to me. I'm very particular in the food that I eat, and for good reason, because I've had a lot of success with it. I've lost a lot of weight already, and I continue to lose weight, um, because I've switched away from. I don't eat any ordinary bread, nor do I use any ordinary flour. I buy my flour from a shop. It's in between Somerset West and Stellenbosch. It's at a place called Fir Grove. It's called Go Natural. They sell the wheat in its natural form, and then they also grind it there at the store for you. So I bake all my bread using that, and when I cook, I only use natural ingredients. So I stay away from all processed or highly processed foods. I stay away from seed oils and all the rest of it. So that's sort of something that's been. I wish more people would start utilizing it. There's at the butchery that I go to close to my house, they sell these cookies and brownies and stuff that's made by a lady. She makes it herself. And you look at the ingredient list and it's amazing, right? It says flour, it says sugar, margarine. And as soon as I saw the margarine, I was like, okay, I can maybe look past the flour, even though I wish you would use natural flour, but I can probably look past the flour. But margarine, seriously, just use butter. So now I can't have those cookies. And I would love to have those cookies if she actually put some butter into them. And then oats. I have some oats every single day as well. Dion, how you doing, sir? Do you live in the Helderberg region? I do, Call. I do. I'm in the Helderberg region, yes. I only cook with butter. Yeah, I use coconut oil. I use butter. Coconut oil is usually for like frying. So if I'm going to deep fry stuff, or if I'm going to like even shallow fry, I'll use coconut oil. Sometimes avo oil, but avo oil can get super expensive. So, the determining, do you not know what margarine is? Or margarine? So margarine or margarine is like a vegetable butter. They use vegetable oil in order to turn it into, it sucks. And Marco, I use tallow from time to time. I use lard as well. The biggest problem with tallow and lard is very expensive, right? Very, very, very expensive. So yeah, it's not always easy to get your hands on it. And I can make it myself, I realize, but I'm being a lazy git. So yeah. Cool, then we're neighbors. Me too. Acorn Creek, Somerset West, Fir Grove area. Call, then you probably know Go Natural. I go there probably once every 2 weeks or so to buy new flour and oats and all that stuff. It's the pronunciation. I'm playing with you. Oh, right. Yeah, sorry. Guys, I realize my accent sucks. And I'm well aware of that. There's people who listen to my videos and they get absolutely outraged by the fact that my accent sounds like I'm trying to be American. But I promise you it has nothing to do with that. It's just the friends that I have are pretty much bog standard American and some British people. So my accent's just, so margarine is just one of those that I would hear them use the word and eventually it just sticks. And then that's just how I speak. I can try, and I do sometimes try in some of my videos. I try actively to change my accent to be a little bit more neutral, but that usually requires me to speak slowly. So if I'm trying to speak more like a South African, then I must speak slowly and I must think about the words as I use them, because my natural response is to roll my R. So for me to say words, I have to actively think words. Because when I speak, I want to say words. So just naturally, I want to say words. I don't want to say words. So get in the van. If I must speak like the the Afrikaans people that like to speak English, then it's maybe a little easier because then you just all th just d and r just r, so it's a little bit easier, although it's not perfect. But yeah, I want to r, and then Harley, yeah, I try to cr, but the accent that I definitely can't do. Ferorius, we are friends, but you and I never speak on Discord. I'm talking about the friends that I hang out with on Discord, right? You and you basically share memes. That's your true superpower, is memes. And even when we hang out on Discord, you don't really speak. You just share memes. That's sort of how you communicate. But yeah, I don't. The one accent I can't do is the Afrikaans English accent, because I've never had the Afrikaans English accent. Never. This is the one accent that I never had, because I learned English from an English South African. Our neighbors, when I was 6 years old, that moved in next door to us, their son couldn't speak a word of Afrikaans. He was only English. And I couldn't speak a word of English. I was only Afrikaans, but we wanted to play together. And so we learned how to speak each other's languages, to the point where he can now speak Afrikaans like an Afrikaner, and I speak English not like an Afrikaner. So yeah, I can genuinely not do the Afrikaans accent. I don't know how to do that one. As jy wil hê, Arlie, ek moet Afrikaans praat, kan ek Afrikaans praat ook. Ek weet nie hoe baie mense in chat sal actually verstaan as ek Afrikaans praat nie. Maar ek praat Afrikaans. As 'n reël praat ek Afrikaans met my hele familie. Ek het baie vriende in Suid-Afrika met wie ek Afrikaans praat. Maar as ek kerk toe gaan, praat ek Engels. So by die kerk praat ek Engels, want ek is in 'n Engelse kerk. En ek sal sê, even as ek uithang saam met my vriende, so van al my vriendekringe bevat Engelse mense in die kring. Weet so, ek het Engelse vriende in elke liewe vriendekring. En hulle verkies om Engels te praat, want baie van hulle kan nie regtig Afrikaans praat nie, of at least sukkel, want 'n paar van hulle is van, this is something I don't know. And it's very weird for me to speak Afrikaans on stream. I don't know why. What's very weird to me, and this is something I only found out once I moved to Cape Town, the white people from Durban really struggles to speak Afrikaans. I don't know why. The Pondering Professor, how are you? But for some reason, Durbanites Afrikaans seems to be like a weird thing that they just don't speak there. I have quite a few friends from Durban that they really struggle. I said, when did you see the big boom in Iran? Specky, I did not yet. Ek is Afrikaner van Durban. You're one of the few, Pondering Professor, because I've met a number of Afrikaners that live here whose children are, well, I'll say this. One of my friends from church, she speaks Afrikaans, full-blown Afrikaans. Her daughter, on the other hand, also one of my friends, but her daughter doesn't speak Afrikaans. She understands it and she can speak it because her mother is Afrikaans, but she speaks English. As a general rule, she prefers to speak English because where she grew up, people spoke English. I have another friend that's from Durban, can't speak a word of Afrikaans. And I'm not even talking, because generally speaking, the Joburgers are just as bad. The people from Joburg, they can understand Afrikaans, but they like to pretend like they can't. You guys know them. You've met people from Joburg. Like, they understand Afrikaans because when you say something offensive, you can see on their face they understood what was just said. But they pretend like they're too good for Afrikaans. At least from the Durban people, I get the sense that Afrikaans isn't spoken that much in Durban. Speak Zulu as well. Nice. Dit is maar ek weet. Is Afrikaner. So those are all the languages you speak, pondering professor. Just say, Chart, wat moet ek sê? Ek is ook in Durban gebore, Afrikaans skool gegaan. Durban was altyd die boer versus Brit. Baie wit mense in Natal is van Britse afkoms. Dion, I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised. True, I am them. Ah, yes, Joburg, the other side of the Borsgordijn. It's interesting. A lot of you, so Antari, you're, from what you said earlier, I'm assuming you are Cape Townian. And what I will say, for those of you who don't know, well, for those of you who were born in the country of the Western Cape, because let's be real, to Western Cape people, the Western Cape is pretty much its own country, and they don't really pay attention to what's happening in the rest of the country. But most of you wouldn't know this. But people who live in Pretoria hate people who live in Joburg, and people who live in Joburg hate people that live in Pretoria. Pretoria is Afrikaans. It's the Boertjies. Joburg, it's the Poms. It's the English. And the war is great. I remember at university, if you heard that one of the guys was from Joburg, that was a signal to fight. That was a signal. I was like, oh, we're fighting. Let's go. Give me a Jagermeister and let's get ready. I mixed the two. I mixed the two, each sentence in a roller coaster. I try not to mix, but you have to. Cape Town, people sniff at people from other provinces. We're different. King, yes and no. So I'm going to end the stream on this because I really need to go buy food. I have choir practice tonight at church, so I need to eat before choir practice. But I will just quickly say this. People say that Cape Town is incredibly cliquey. I heard this a lot coming here. But I would argue those cliques very much depend on you, on the person. Because I came here and I am friends with everyone. I have Cape Townian friends. I have friends that came from the north and now live in Cape Town. I'm just friends with everyone. Because I'm friendly with everyone. Right? When I see people, I greet them and I ask them, how are you? And I start conversations with random people in public because I like it. I find it interesting to hear what people are doing. So I think the biggest problem is a lot of people from the north arrive here and then they have this sort of already built up idea that people in Cape Town are cliquey. And so they treat people in Cape Town as if they're cliquey. And so people in Cape Town become cliquey. Rather than just being open, and then you find they're actually quite nice. They're actually quite nice. Jy het net 'n lekker persoonlikheid, so jy het vriende. I think, pondering professor, I'm a bit more jovial than most people. Well, I'm jovial, right? So I like people, and I connect quite easily with people. So that's definitely a blessing for me. But even my brother, who's a lot more introverted, my brother isn't really that big of he's not a social butterfly like me. And he doesn't prefer social, but even he has made friends with so many people. And, he hasn't found Cape Town to be super cliquey because, like me, he's also very open and friendly and, he'll say hello, although he's much more reserved. I'll take over the show. Like, you give me half a second and I'll run the room. He's not like that. He'll sit in the back and just sort of keep to himself. But, it works. We each do what we must. He's an analyst and I'm a YouTuber. So I guess the personalities worked exactly the way that it was supposed to. I have Afrikaans parents, pondering professor, and you're Afrikaans, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. I feel like Afrikaans parents are built differently. good manners are slapped into you until it's sort of, it's there. You know, it's automatic. You don't have to think about it. It just happens. But okay, ladies and gentlemen, I truly appreciate each and every one of you for being here, for hanging out with me. So thank you to every single one of you that donated to the channel, that's been here, that sits here, that hits the like button on the streams. Every single time we do a stream, you guys show up. I truly appreciate you. Tomorrow's stream, if nothing else changes, if everything stays the same, tomorrow's stream will be, can Christians support war? Is that even something that Christians can do? It's something that I'm really looking forward to. So hopefully you will join me for that. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, be good to each other. Be kind to each other. And I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.